talking about what's going to happen there. So, one of the big things, as I said before, that you're going to need to know is throughout the course of respiration, you're going to see electrons transferred from an intermediate to a molecule of NAD+. This is going to be facilitated by the presence of an enzyme called dehydrogenase. Sounds really complicated and really weird, but let's break down that word. First off, it ends in ACE. What does that tell you?
It's an enzyme.
It's an enzyme. Now, most enzymes will either tell you, A, what their substrate is, or B, what they do in their name. Dehydrogenase. Whenever you see D in front of a word, what does it usually mean?
Remove or undo.
Break down or remove. Dehydrogenase literally translates to an enzyme that removes hydrogens. And you'll notice between this reactant and this product, what did we lose? Hydrogen, right? By removing that hydrogen and transferring it to NAD+, we're actively reducing the NAD+ to NADH. And we are oxidizing this particular intermediate from here to here. Questions? Concerns?
So that carbon-oxygen, that's actually a double bond. It's not an equal sign.
Yes, that's a double bond right there. Okay. Yes, this right here between the carbon and oxygen is a double bond. Whenever we're working with chemical reactions, we're never going to see equal signs. NAD+ is reduced to NADH. Okay? Now, one last thing I want to bring to your attention in this equation before we move on is notice that this dehydrogenase removed this hydrogen here and also this hydrogen over here. But how many of those hydrogens actually got attached to NAD+?
One.
Just one. What's the other one doing right now?
Floating around.
It's floating around. What do we also call this outside of a hydrogen ion?
Hydronium. Hydronium.
No, it starts with a P word.
Oh.
A proton. A proton. This hydrogen represents a hydrogen that has lost its one and only electron, which means all it is a nucleus with a neutron and a proton, but no electron in its outermost shell. These protons are going to be the single most important thing in the final stage of cellular respiration. These are the reason why we're able to generate the large amounts of ATP in the last stage of respiration. I'll say it again because I see people write. These protons are the single most important thing that is going to help us produce ATP in the final stage of respiration. Do I need to say it once more? Okay. These protons are the single most important thing that is going to help us generate ATP in the final stage of cellular respiration.
How do you remember? If you say so much mineral acids, you always remember that.
I think it's called photogenic memory, but I can't remember. I'm pretty sure it is. There's photographic and photogenic. I'm really, really good with auditory memory. Visually, I'm okay. But auditory, I can pretty much watch television shows and movies and re-quote the whole thing right after. So.
I do have a question about
Yes.
that. Now, it's fine on the equation, the chemical equation, to have a proton drifting around freely, but that's not going to happen in your body.
This proton here?
Yeah.
You most likely will in the mitochondria, actually. In fact, they may associate to a degree with water, but you're going to find that the concentration of protons is so high that you're probably not going to have necessarily enough water molecules to always associate with each and every one of those. And beyond that, we're going to have a specialized protein that removes these protons from the water molecules and pushes them through the membrane of the mitochondria. Electrochemical gradient? Yes, or the cotransport. Okay? So you do actually have these. And remember also, Richard, when we're doing this, we are simplifying, and you are correct in stating we're not going to have a bunch of protons just floating around. But also remember that that association of that proton with the water molecule is instantaneous, and then they're probably repelled once again. Okay? So it's instantaneous and then repelled. Instantaneous, repelled. It's happening so fast that you are correct. We can't say, hey, we've isolated a ton of protons here. Because if it's in an aqueous solution, they're always going to be able to associate with water. But think about how much more complicated this is going to start looking if we start throwing water into the whole equation. But what we're also going to find, Richard, is at the very end of aerobic respiration, these protons are actually going to form a water molecule by associating with oxygen. And that oxygen is going to have 2 additional electrons. So it won't be a water molecule, it'll be oxygen with 2 extra electrons that attracts 2 protons, and they'll form water. And we'll see that at the end of the electron transport chain. Okay, so NAD plus is a coenzyme. You'll recall coenzymes can be organic molecules like vitamins. And the big thing with NAD plus is that it is an electron acceptor. This is going to be crucial as well, because we're going to generate several molecules of NADH that we're also going to use in that final stage of cellular respiration. So far I've told you, 2 of the big things we're going to need for that last stage are going to be NADH and those protons. What you're really going to find as we go through the process of cellular respiration is that the first 2 stages, while they are going to produce some ATP, the real meat and potatoes of all the ATP that's produced happens in the last stage. So those first 2 stages are making things that we'll need to use in the final stage of cellular respiration. So the first 2 stages of cellular respiration, glycolysis and the citric acid cycle, while they do make ATP, their bigger contribution to this whole thing will be making those NADHs and those protons that we're going to utilize in the last stage of cellular respiration. Okay? All right, so here is the reduction and oxidation. First, the reduction of NAD plus to NADH, and then the oxidation of NADH to NAD plus. Okay? Via dehydrogenase. Good news, this is probably the last time you're going to see the full chemical representation of this molecule. Okay? From here on out, I'm simply going to draw NAD plus and NADH. Okay? And also always remember, after we reduce NAD plus to NADH, one of those 2 protons from this redox reaction associates with the NAD plus to form NADH, but the other proton is excess and is left free floating as a proton. And here's why NADH is so crucial. The electrons that it carries are going to be donated to an electron transport chain. Its name, as it implies, is simply a chain where we're transporting electrons from one molecule to another. So this electron transport chain is a systematic series of redox reactions. Okay? Now, I'm sure that this, at this point in time, makes as much sense to you as me talking about my favorite memory from childhood without telling you any of the people that I'm talking about. Okay? So let me just tell you real quick, the reason why this is so important is because what we're doing in this electron transport chain is we are slowly lowering the energy of those electrons that are being transferred. What this means is every time we take a small step down, we're only releasing a small amount of energy, which we can harness. If we were to take those electrons and drop them dramatically in energy, we're probably going to lose the majority of that energy as heat. Okay? That's what you see when you light a piece of wood on fire. Okay? The reason why it burns, you're actually burning the glucose, breaking the bonds in the glucose, just like we're doing here, but you're going from here all the way down to here in a few seconds. So all that energy, for the most part, is being released as heat. We don't want to do that. We want to actually maximize the amount of energy we get out of the glucose molecule. So we need to do this in a slow, systematic sort of way. Okay? So again, explosive, Bad because it releases a large amount of heat and light energy without us able to harness it. Electron transport chain, good, okay? Because we can systematically go down slowly in energy, and as we do that, release a select amount of energy through those redox reactions. Now, understand one final thing, too, and I'll actually let y'all catch up and write it real quick before I say this.
So this one is good because it slowly lowers the energy step by step.
Right. Exactly. So it makes it easier for us to deal with the energy that's being released and utilize it better. If we did this, we probably wouldn't be around for that long. Okay? Now, the one thing I want you to take away from this and understand is that the energy that's released in the electron transport chain, like in other words, the electrons being transferred is not what generates the ATP. The chain simply provides us with the energy that we need to make the ATP. Yes. Okay? The electron transport chain itself, as we're moving those electrons down and releasing that energy, the energy that we release is not ATP. That energy instead is used to make the ATP. Okay? So one last time. As we move the electrons down the electron transport chain, the energy that's released is not ATP. It's instead used to make ATP. And then Richard kind of to readdress what we were talking about. At the end of this whole process, the oxygen is going to actually combine with those protons, and it's going to form water. It's also going to act as the final electron acceptor, which is why this is called aerobic respiration. In aerobic respiration, oxygen will be at the very bottom of the electron transport chain to accept those electrons and eventually become water.
So this is aerobic.
This is aerobic respiration right here. Now, as we talked about last time, I had y'all guess how much of the energy in a single molecule of glucose we can actually harness through this process. 40% approximately. At maximum, with a single molecule of glucose, you can generate 38 molecules of ATP at maximum. It fluctuates between 36 and 38. But that's a whole heck of a lot more than we'd be able to generate from this explosive reaction here. An explosive reaction? Well, this is typically what you see. So, an example. You go outside, you get in your car, you turn your car on. Does your car explode? No, because it's utilizing a form of combustion that's very similar to the electron transport chain. Basically what it's doing is your fuel pump is pumping a small quantity of gasoline into your engine. The pistons are firing, and they're causing a combustion reaction to occur for that small amount of gasoline. Now, let's say instead of your car, I give you a book of matches, and I send you out to the parking lot where there currently is just a huge canister of gasoline. Are you going to light any of those matches? Now, that would be an example of an explosive reaction. The car is an example of cellular respiration. Okay? This is a controlled process where we still have the same amount of fuel, but we're kind of minimizing the amount that we're using at any one point in time to maximize the amount of energy we can get out of it. There's the same amount of potential energy between the gas canister